Hey, Trail people, you're listening to the Trail Network podcast hosted by Rachel Drake, Leah Yingling, Hillary Yang, and Katie Asmuth. I'm here today with Katie and Rachel. I'm Leah. We're here to celebrate the community, connections, and untold stories within trail running. Let's dive in. So, today we're going to get to some listener questions that have been in our inboxes over the last couple weeks. Really exciting questions that we've been pondering, and hopefully we can shed some light on and get some good answers to. I feel like Katie and Rachel, you guys have been getting a lot of these ones.
Oh my gosh, so many. Okay, so can I just say that when people ask questions, it has me take a step back when there's these questions about I'm just getting into trail running. I get this like visceral excitement. Like I can't handle the excitement. Like all I want to do is just be like, you did it. You like your life is forever changed. Let's go. It makes me so excited. But I do remember when I first got into trail running, I remember taking off the little plastic part of my flask, of my softies for my pack.
Yeah.
In the parking lot, like getting ready for my first trail race and going like, I think this is how it works. Like I hadn't never tried it before because I never run that far, like total new, but stuff like that, because I got it just because somebody on a group trail run told me I should buy one. So I did, but we're getting questions like that. Like, what do we invest in? What do we have to have? That sort of thing. So we should dive in, but any comments from Leah, Rachel, about your initial reaction when people say, I want to get into trail running? Like, what is your initial gut reaction there?
Yeah, that's a great question. Sometimes I happen upon the ultramarathon Reddit page, and I think that's a really fun page to spend some time on because you get such a diversity of perspectives, and often they are these runners who are just getting into the sport. And it makes me reflect back on like, where did I acquire my information when I was getting into the sport? And like, what was the pack? I mean, I didn't use a pack. I was using the Amphipod handheld bottles, and I was wearing these like Solomon shoes that I got at like on the discount rack somewhere that were not very good, but they're fine. But it's like, where did we find our information back then? Was it I Run Far? Was it like looking at blogs? It's interesting how the sources of information have changed, but have also kind of remained the same over time too. So it gets me excited because it just lets me reflect back on, a 10 plus year journey now in the sport. And I love seeing people enter the sport and find it too, and find it from different avenues.
Yeah, I also get super excited, like either people reaching out on social media or people I come across in the hospital who like hear that I like trail running, and then they've never done it, or they are interested or curious, and it's just like it's hard not to gush too much. And Leah, hearing you talk about like trying to remember where you acquired your information has me thinking about that too. And I honestly feel like so much of it was just trial and error, because I didn't really have like a contact or someone that I could kind of like show me the way. And I'll never forget mapping out a 15-mile run in the Columbia River Gorge, which I thought was going to take me 2 hours, but I didn't understand the concept of vert. And I think it took me like 5 hours, and I only brought one tube of Cliff shot blocks, and I was totally late for class that day.
Yeah.
We've all been there.
I remember a friend, this is Katie talking about, I remember a friend was shocked that I only owned trail shoes. And I just thought, well, I only needed one pair of shoes, and I would do my workouts with them, or I would do all road running, like all shoes was just one pair of trail shoes. And I remember getting my first pair of like road shoes and being like, whoa, like people have more than one type of shoe, which was like mind boggling for me for running after running several years. Like it took me that long to be like, oh, that's interesting. But I mean, I'm sure some people still do that, but I just think that was like shocking. It took me years to figure that out,
I do think social media has helped so much. Mike and I have had this conversation a lot recently with just the trajectory of new, very promising athletes in the sport. I feel like back in when we were entering this sport, it took us quite a few years to really nail down all the various variables that go into having an epic performance. And like nutrition maybe took trial and error of like a year or 2 years, 3 years until you really nailed it. Cooling took a year or 2. Like crushing Western states, like, took a
Mhm.
couple years to get, like, perfectly right, and I think social media, podcasts, like, word of mouth, just, like, how big the community is and how much it's grown has allowed for a lot of people to enter this sport, acquire a lot of knowledge fast, and nail it pretty quickly, and I think that's a pretty interesting space to be in, especially for people who have been in the sport for a long, long time to be like, "I put in my time,
Right.
it's taken me forever to find my level of success," and to see a lot of, newcomers just crush it off the bat. It's really cool to just have the different types of athletes too.
Yeah. Leah, okay, I got a little bit of an alternate perspective here. I feel like it's good that there's a lot of information available, but also I think if I was coming into the sport right now and I had all this information and I knew what were the big races, the golden ticket races, the races with eyes on them, I think it would have possibly negatively influenced my race choice and possibly crushed my love for the sport. Because when I reflect on my first few years of ultra running, I was just doing local races throughout Oregon and Washington with the race organizations that I knew. And it took me probably 2 or 3 years before Tyler, who's now my husband, was like, maybe you should think about doing these more competitive races, which I wasn't doing it to be competitive or get sponsors or anything. But I think if I had jumped into that too soon with all this like media and stuff, I think it would have maybe been overwhelming.
I totally agree, and I think, when you get into the sport these days, there's the variety of podcasts that you can listen to that are often, like, focused on the professionalism of the sport and that side of it, and it makes you think that that is the end goal or should be the end goal, and yeah, Rachel, I think my and Katie, yours too, are like, our trajectory in the sports have very much been, like, the backyard
Mhm.
races probably for the first at least 50% of our ultra running career so far, and I think there's something special about that too, where, like, you kinda find yourself and you figure it out.
Quick break to thank John G for sponsoring this episode of the pod. I want to give a big shout out to this new hat that I have from John G, the AFO Hyperlight Cap. It is awesome, and their patterns are super fun and summery, and I know you're going to love them. Check it out. They're super light, like 29 grams, and it's really kind of like a weightless feel, and you can scrunch it up and put it into your pack really easily if you don't want it. But really, you mostly do want it because it looks so cool. So check it out, johng.com, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I do. When there's too much information, it can be paralyzing, right? Like, well, which one's actually the most important? Like, which PT exercise do I actually do because I have thousands that I've seen on social media or whatever, right? Like, and then I'm just not going to do any of them because I don't know which one I should do, right? And kind of back to like your gear choices and how your fueling choices, I mean, there's so much information out there that I do think it can be paralyzing and you get so many opinions from everybody. But I do want to give a shout out to your local trail running club, right? Like the
Oh,
people that
totally.
are meeting up once a week and going for a party pace trail run and just trying to pick their brains. Like, what do you do? What do you use? What races are you doing? Right? Where then you start building that community and you have resources to lean on when you need those questions answered. And I think that that's probably kind of the soul of our sport. Like local trail. Of course, we have Ultra Running Magazine, we have I Run Far, and we have all these podcasts and all these other places to get information, which I think are really fun. But I do think it's got to start with your local trail running group. I don't know.
Yeah, who was your first, like, local trail running group or trail running groups that you guys were involved with when you're getting into trail running?
So Portland has a great trail running community, and I feel like one of the race organizations there, Go Beyond, I think I've done most of their races, and they put on this weekly trail series. It's like 5 to 8 miles every Wednesday night. and I would go to those, and it was just so fun because you'd see the same people from week to week, and you'd make friends, and they'd make recommendations for other races or different things to try. So I feel like, yeah, shout out to Go Beyond. What
That's
about you
awesome.
guys?
Mine? So I had 2 that were kind of my first forays into trail running and trail running in different ways. So when I was living back in DC, I joined the Virginia Happy Trail Running Club, and, that was probably back in 2014, 15 timeframe, and that was truly my first trail running. I was always running on, like, tow paths back there, but we'd go into, like, Great Falls in Virginia and do a lot of runs on there, in there on the weekends. And then when I moved to Utah, I joined the Wasatch Mountain Wranglers, which we had these Wednesday night runs. And I think I did my first Wednesday night run. Like, I moved here on a Tuesday, did my first run on a Wednesday up to Lake Blanche, which was like six
That's
and a
pretty
half miles
hardcore.
with like 2,700 feet of climbing up to probably like over 8 to 9,000 feet, and wiped out so hard on the descent. And I remember being like, this is my new reality, but these are my new buds. And that group was very much responsible for like the next 3 years of my ultra running. They took me on so many adventures. We're all of like my first friends in Utah and still are some of my really good friends to date. And just at Twisted Fork this past weekend, my friend and I were chatting a little bit about how we feel like the trail running community and the Wasatch has like evolved over the years, but it's really cool to still see a lot of those familiar faces that might have been like your really good friends 10 years ago, but like everybody's kind of like transitioned to various stages of their life now, but you still always have that little connection.
I love that. And you'll see them at different races, right? You're like,
Yes.
and then you begin
Yes.
just like familiar faces all the time, which is makes this community
I
so much
love it.
smaller. Mine was Ultra Ladies, and I knew
Oh,
nothing about trail running. I just grew up backpacking, and I just was like red born to run. And it was 2013, and I was like, I'm starting to run on trails. And yeah, and for me, I was living in Los Angeles, and it's so crazy because you live next to these insane, beautiful mountains, but you don't know how to access them except for these really stressful trailheads that are packed with humans. And I'm like, that's not my
oh,
vibe. And so
yeah.
going with the Ultra Ladies had me going on all these remote trails that there weren't anybody, and I got to bond with all these women that I learned so much from. Oh my gosh. I remember my first Western States meeting up with one of my friends from that group going, how do I tape my feet and also have it be okay running through water? And was scared about that. And she had like this whole system down about how to waterproof your taped feet. And it like blew my mind. And she's been doing it for decades, and I was like, I learned so much from her. And anyway, so fun. And it felt as if that definitely catapulted my love for running. So I think that's probably my number one advice. We should get to these questions. But besides joining a trail running group, is there any first things that you think you should do before or like when you're beginning trail running? Rachel, any thoughts on that?
I think like going into your local running store and trying on a bunch of different trail running shoes to see what feels good on your feet, and letting the experts do what they do and telling them, okay, these are the types of trails I want to run, or I want a shoe that's good for both trail and road. And that's what I did when I got my first pair of trail running shoes. I went into Portland Running Company and got outfitted with some shoes. So I think like that's really critical piece of the puzzle, is finding something that feels good on your feet and can navigate the trails.
I love that. I was gonna go with the shoes part. I think finding like experienced buddies in the trail world has been that was so helpful for me early on. I know like I met Mike whenever I was just getting into running my first 50 miler. And honestly, he had this running blog back in 2011 and 2012. And sometimes we like to like Google search it and find it on the internet and go read it. And looking back, like granted, he was running ultras for like 5, 6 years at that point, but realistically, he knew nothing and was like getting injured all the time, eating nothing. So maybe he wasn't the best source of information, but he like taught me the ins and outs of going to trail races, like camping before them, what that looks like, how you crew at a race. And granted, like we've gotten so much more efficient and minimal over the years with some of those things, but it was, I think, having a bud to kind of like teach you the ropes was super helpful.
Yeah, isn't it crazy? It took you years. And you think about this like
Years.
instant gratification culture. It's so different now.
Yeah.
People just want to learn now. I want to be good at it now. I want all the
Yeah.
things now, but there's a beauty in it taking time and figuring it out and messing up and learning from that. I don't know. I don't regret all of the mistakes were
Mhm.
part of the journey. I don't know.
Yeah. I think so too, and
Yeah.
it's like I think we talk about that almost weekly on here where it's like the mistakes that we've made, what we've learned from them, and like how when we have a bad race or a little bit of a disappointing race, we come out of it with way more learnings than had we had a great day. And I think that's part of what's made me a half decent runner over the years is all those failed races.
Yeah, I feel like this comes up a lot in education and as someone who's just always in school and also someone who's raising a child, it's like
Mhm.
the importance of being process oriented and not outcomes oriented. It also really applies to trail running.
Yeah. I have one other thought as well. I remember when I got my first GPX watch and learned how to put routes on my watch, and it like blew my mind, like the freedom that came with that. Because if you don't know your backyard, you don't know these trails, you don't know, like, right? Like, unless you have a buddy that knows them, then you're kind of
Mhm.
figuring it out on your own. And anyway, so I remember being able to route things on my own, and that felt really empowering. And I always like running with people on big adventures, but sometimes you got to get your mileage in and you just need to go out for that long run. And that was really, really freeing for me, to be able to have that independence and feel really comfortable with my watch telling me where to go. Oh, and another one, if you are in the backcountry a lot, having a flask with I think it's KDB, Ketadine. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's
Oh, yes, yes,
the
yes, like the
Oh,
Katadyn.
Catadine
Catadine,
with the
Yeah.
Y.
the
The
filter.
filter, having a
I
filter
was
on a
like, that sounds
flask.
an awful lot like ketamine.
Yes, it's like that. I should know the exact name. But I mean, we've gone through, like, we have probably 3 of them because that changed everything. Because then you could go further, and deeper if you had that access.
Yeah, Hydra Pack makes those too,
Okay.
those filters,
So
yeah.
any filter on a softie, life changing.
Mhm, mhm.
Anyway. All right. We should get to our questions because we have
Yeah.
like no more time. Okay. We're keeping this one short today, folks. Okay. This one comes from, who should we start with?
I like this one that's like just it's kind of it has to do with gear.
Okay.
I feel like just it goes with what we were just chatting about, but a piece of gear that everyone should invest in was one of the questions.
All right, I'm gonna stick to my GPX watch and Catadine or whatever, a filter on your softie.
I mean, okay, so I kind of have two answers. Right now, if you are a pregnant person or someone with a large uterus for any reason, a belly band is life saving. I also just got some, what's it called, Leah? The V
The
sling.
V-sling.
That's like a very specific recommendation for pregnancy because it really like it takes pressure off your bladder, it takes pressure off your pelvis. Um, that's just been like my most critical piece of gear more than anything. But I realize that that's not going to apply to most people listening to the podcast. So honestly, this is a pretty simple one, but I think a good pair of socks that don't tear easily. I'm biased in that I'm sponsored by Darn Tough Socks and they really do make darn tough socks that don't rip. But for my first few years, I hadn't discovered them yet. And I was constantly going through socks, poking holes in them and having to replace them. So I think just like it's a simple thing. It can give you more padding too. Lots of socks you can get with additional padding. So
And I will say, I'm not a sponsored Darn Tough athlete, but I've been a Darn Tough loyalist since 2018, and I wear their socks in I've worn them in every single ultra I've done since 2018, and
wow.
I agree with you, Rach. It's like finding a pair of socks that works well for you, but also testing it in, like, your race conditions. So, I
Mhm.
know we'll have a lot of Western states chatter coming up, but Western states, you are, like, wet all day long, and running in dry conditions and running wet conditions is very different for your feet. So being able to test a pair of socks with your race day shoes in those conditions is absolutely critical because you never know what your feet are going to look like come race
Yep.
day.
Can I give my sock recommendation just to give a different opinion? I love toe socks. I know that sounds weird. Some people will hate
Ugh.
them, but I love them because I've never once had a blister on my toes. I've never had a problem. So for me, I've always used Exoskin. I've used Exoskin from the beginning, 2018. And they're like, I only wear them during races because I know they work for me. And yeah, they are for me the best socks. And friction free, baby, is the name of the game. So
Don't you also tape your toes
I do. I've
individually,
never not
right?
done that. So I don't know what it would be like if I didn't. um,
But maybe I'm just saying, like, Katie has this whole formula for her feet, so it might be the socks, it might
I
be
don't
the
know.
tape,
I've
might be
learned
a
it from the
combination, but
beginning. So you can't change it because
yeah.
that's what I've learned. And I only do it when I
No.
race. But
That's
yeah, it's what works for you.
I think that it goes to show that everybody's different, their approach. I've never taped my toes. Sounds nice though. My favorite piece of gear that I don't think I could live without is probably a hydration pack. I think I've said on this podcast a million times now, you guys are probably sick of hearing me, but I'm such a pack girly by heart. I've been using packs probably for like the last 8 years exclusively in races. And every time I try to transition to handhelds, I always just come right back to my pack. So the one I'm currently using is the Osprey, the pro version of the Dyna. And they have a variety of different sizes. So I think I've been using a 6-liter pack there. The Pro line will come out next spring, which is really exciting. I think Rachel and I, and then Katie, when Katie was a part of the Osprey family, we worked really hard on informing the design of those packs. But I think they just make some of the most reliable packs that have a lifespan of just extreme longevity. So always love my Osprey pack, and I don't think I can do a run without it these days.
Yeah, I think having a good pack is like it's pretty underrated because it is something that can malfunction, it can cause chafing, it can be heavy and uncomfortable. And honestly, like Leah's talking about, I mean the durability of the Osprey packs is truly next level. Like I've never had anything break on any of my Osprey packs, and I've had them for 8 years. So what they're coming out with is super exciting. And yeah, it's a piece of gear that you're going to need if you're doing ultras. You got to carry your snacks and your water. So definitely
Yeah,
check that
and I
out.
think just with like how much nutrition has grown in popularity in the sport, like you got to carry a lot these days, whether that's your hydration or your nutrition. And I think Rachel, this is something like you and I have talked a lot about over the years. Is just you used to be a big bladder girl with your bladder on your back.
Mhm.
Have always liked the flasks up front. I think talking to Grayson Murphy, I was trying to convince her to go to the 2 flask life in the front of her pack because she's also
She's a
prefers.
bladder
She's a
girly.
bladder girly. So I think that's what's nice about Osprey too. It's really interchangeable, and you've got your options. So if you're bladder girly or if you're bottle girly, it serves you both ways.
Definitely.
I was going to say with the handhelds, if you have a handheld, it's much harder to eat. So
Yes.
just to throw that out there. Same with if you're using poles, it's just harder to eat. So just
Yeah.
remember that when you're racing.
And I'm more prone to falling when I'm carrying a handheld. I don't know what it is. It's probably just me, but I fall way less when I'm wearing a pack. So
This is a good follow-up question to that one. On trails, if it's not muddy, how often do you change shoes and socks for the long races?
mm.
Leah, I'm curious to ask you this
Yeah,
because
how
you from
far? What does long
UTMB.
race mean to you?
Yeah, this is really interesting because I think it definitely varies based on just the terrain that you're experiencing, the condition of your feet, like whether it's wet, like for Western states. I know this is like not necessarily muddy at Western states, but like so it's so wet there. And I think there was 2 years, 2 of my 3 years, I've changed shoes just once, but I changed my socks like honestly like 2 or 3
Oh, wow.
times during Western states. And then last year I didn't change socks or shoes once during Western states. I wore the same pair of shoes, same pair of socks the whole way through. During UTMB, I changed my shoes once and then my socks twice, I think. So sometimes like you might think you need a shoe change, but what you actually need is a sock change, just and like not just a sock change, but like a whole foot rub down as well.
Hmm.
And then during further, I can't tell you how many times I changed my shoes. It was really nice to have like a different sensation. So I changed into like different type. We had some different types of shoes that we could wear, and then different sizes too. So based on like how my feet might have been swelling after a certain day, I'd bump up half a size and things like that. Just have a different sensation. But I'd say in most 100 milers, I account for needing to change my shoes and socks upwards of 2 to 3 times, but realistically, usually just once, and ideally 0.
Mhm.
How about you
Yeah.
guys?
Rachel, go for it.
I've only ever done I mean, I've only ever done one 100-miler, and that was Western States, and my hope and my plan was to not change shoes at all, but I was having some issues with my first pair of shoes, so I switched shoes at Forest Hill, and that was just, like, such a game changer, and it wasn't because they were wet, I was just having some pressure points and switched into my trusty Trail Pegasus, and that felt so good, but Leah still kept chasing me down.
Still couldn't get her.
Go listen back to that year ago. That episode was a year ago, guys. Jeez.
So
The
fun.
Rachel Leah throwdown. So fun.
Uh,
I've never changed socks ever. I changed
oh.
shoes once at the Western States 2023 when the first 30 miles were in snow. And I
Mm.
knew I needed
Mm.
a bigger lug on my shoes. And so then at Forest Hill, I switched to like very minimal grip. So I was faster during that section. But yeah, that was the only first time I've ever changed shoes. So I think this
Wow.
really, when the question from Christian said, long races, but like, is long 100 miles, is long 100K, is long
Yeah.
further, like 500 plus miles or 250 like Cocodona. So we don't know, but I think it probably depends on how wet it is, how long it is. And
Yeah, or
Totally.
how much the terrain varies, like, for
yeah,
you at Western States or for me at JFK, the first 11 miles being on the Appalachian Trail and then switching into speedy road shoes was almost a prerequisite for
I mean,
that
everybody
race
does
to
that. Yeah.
fully optimize it, yeah. Although I talked to Ellie Greenwood, the one of the former course record holders, and I asked her what shoes she wore, and she sent me a link to these, like, I think they were like Merrill trail shoes, and I was just like, "Man,
What a
I swear
badass.
If Ellie had some Alpha Flies, she'd be running like 5:30 at JFK."
Oh.
Oh, so good. Okay, so I recently got into ultra and marathons over the last year. I'm planning on doing a 56 miler this September, 12-hour race in December, but I'm trying to figure out how to train for this. Would you recommend double daily easy runs or 1.5 to 2 hour long easy sessions? So, like, it says I'm comfortably at 50-ish miles per week. So would you recommend doing like one long run or two shorter runs every day?
Mm. My gut reaction here is like whatever works best with your lifestyle for especially the weekdays. I think weekdays are often a lot of like family time and like work time, and it's tough to get in what you might need in one session. So perhaps breaking up those weekday runs into 2 sessions might be more palatable and more reasonable with your lifestyle. So I think for me, I'm always thinking about how do I make my running fit into my life, less so about how do I fit my life into my running goals. So I think I would kind of start there, but I do think there is a lot of value in like weekend long runs, for time on feet, for simulating what it's going to be like on race day, and ideally getting some sort of back to back long run. It doesn't need to be on a weekend. I guess that's just how I structure my time. And some people might be working on weekends and have more flexibility during weekdays. But I think yeah, focusing on having a day or two where you are on your feet for a longer period of time seems to be the gold standard for most. But I know that there's a lot of different ways of doing things. I know Camille Herron is one who advocates for kind of breaking training up into different blocks, and she's had a lot of success with that. So different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, I think my gut reaction, I love Leah's gut reaction better than mine, and just in that it's like, yes, whatever works best for your life. And then I was thinking back to when I was training for JFK, being on call at the hospital, I would hop on the treadmill, run a mile or two, get paged, have to go see a patient, hop back on the treadmill, run another mile or two, which is much more of the double daily easy run
Yeah.
formula, not the 1 to 2 hour long run. But I could get like 10 miles in a shift with that method. And I think, like Leah said, it's like you just kind of work it into your life, whatever is best for you. But if you have the flexibility and the time, I think probably physiologically it's more optimal to simulate if you're doing a 12-hour race or a 56-mile race to get those longer consistent sessions in to practice your fueling and just run on tired legs.
That's my gut reaction too, Rachel. If you have the time and you're already running 50 miles a week, I would say like get in some long runs, like if you have time for a 2-hour run at once, do that. That's going to, in the long run, get you where you want to go. I also think I'm just going to give a shout out for coaches. That this is another thing we didn't mention. But when you are first starting out and you don't really know the answers to these questions, there are lots of coaches out there that are really affordable and worth it. And I think that you want to invest in yourself and like have that person that you can kind of, rely on to get your training dialed for your big goal races. And not just affordable. I didn't mean it like that. Like we should be paying our coaches for the record. They're life changers and you need to invest in yourself if this is something you really care about, and coaching can really help you in that longevity, right? So maybe you're not getting injured because you're actually training smarter, that sort of thing.
That's a really good point, Katie. And it's not even just for the training, it's for the gear recommendations and the race recommendations and the process race recommendations. Like having a coach who's been in the sport for a while, when you tell them your goal race, they can then recommend some process races that will nicely simulate certain conditions for your goal race. And that's something I see my husband Tyler coaches, and I feel like that's something he does really well, is like kind of that wraparound care. It's not just writing the training, it's talking about nutrition and sleep and racing and, gear and everything.
I want to keep talking, but we have a hard deadline tonight. There's so many more questions we have, you guys. So we're going to have to hit this another time. One of the questions I really want you guys to think about, because I think we need to address that at some point at least, but I want to talk about maybe next pod, a little teaser. How would we race Western states if we were competing this year, which I think would be really fun. So anyways, a little teaser there, but we're going to end it. Anything you guys want to end the pod with? Any shout outs, especially to these new runners out there? Any words of wisdom?
I just want to say, like, let your joy be your compass. And, even listening to our podcast, we're talking about our experiences and our recommendations, but like, make sure you're following your joy and whatever is exciting to you, and try not to get bogged down in what other people think are exciting.
Amen.
I want to make a shout out for local trail races. And I hope you guys don't mind me making a plug, but we had a race director from outside of Pittsburgh reach out to us, who's really trying to get 50% representation in her races outside of Pittsburgh. So her name's Amy Nelson, and I think she coordinates the Rachel Carson Trail Ultra, and they still have like 8 spots to fill up. And I think the race is coming up very soon for women. And I think something I complain about a lot is just how we always see the male representation being quite a bit higher in trail and ultra running. And there's a lot of race directors out there who are putting initiatives in to make it more equal, to giving resources for women, for mom. Like this weekend at Twisted Fork, Finn and Jules, it was their first year putting on that race, and they had childcare available to anybody who needed it. And it was awesome to see both like husband and wife pairs like Anthony and Katie Costalis were able to go out there and race their own respective distances, and then were able to have Piper at the finish line of both of them after she came out of the childcare for the day. So shout out Amy Nelson, who's in the Northeast. Please reach out to her if you have any interest in running her races. But I think there's a lot of great women and female race directors doing great things for the sport. Also, like Caleb Efta out at High Lonesome, the initiatives that he puts forward for women, Luke Nelson at Scout Mountain. Shout out to all those race
Chrissy
directors
Mel.
who are, pushing for just more parity in the sport.
Those are some good ones. All right, let's wrap it up, everybody. This was really fun. Also, a little teasers. We're going to do an in-person pod in Olympic Village at the Olympic Valley, in the Village, I should say, coming up in the next couple of weeks too. So we hope to see you there, but we will send out more information as we have it. Till next time, Trail family. Bye.